Alright, so welcome back. This is the first class for Apostolic Praise Vocals, Apostolic Praise Choir Parts. And in the first lesson, you learned a couple of songs, and you learned the basic idea of how choir parts work. You know, you have the soprano on top, you have the alto underneath, and then you've got the tenor that's underneath that. And of course, the soprano part can be thought of as underneath the tenor part if the tenor part is singing lead, but that's a different discussion for another lesson. So, what we're basically going to do here is I'm going to teach you a couple of tricks, a couple of secrets to being able to figure out the vocal part using passing chords. Now this is what I do a lot of times. Of course, the very best thing to do is to stick some headphones on, you know, put some earplugs in, whatever you want to use, whatever you have at your disposal, and listen and figure out what the part is. Sit down at the piano, especially when you're a beginner. Very important. Sit down at the piano, try to figure it out by ear. Now, the easiest part to hear is going to be the lead part, which in most of your songs is going to be soprano. Not all songs, though. Some songs, tenor is lead. Very few select songs, the altos actually will sing the lead part for all of it, if not for part of it. So, parts, I like to say, is kind of subjective, and what that means, what I mean by that, is that it's different. The same song can be sung with different notes for the parts. In other words, one alto may hear it one way, one alto may hear it a different way. Obviously, you want everybody to be singing the same thing so it will sound good, but just because they're singing different things doesn't necessarily mean it's going to sound bad. So, you know, some songs you learn, you know, I'll teach one way. The next week, you know, or a month later, we might sing it a different way. It's really all about what sounds good, and I like to change my music up, make it sound a little different where it's not the same every time. You may not prefer that. Now, the best thing to do is just try to match what they're doing on the CD and listen as closely to that as possible. So, for instance, most songs have, like I said, soprano is the lead, and when you're going to pick out a part, let's just say, you know, for being easy sake, that the soprano is the lead part. So, very easy. All you've got to do is sit down and pick out the melody line of the song. Pretty much anybody can do that. Let's say that we're in the key of F. Okay, you know your notes in the key of F are F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F. Okay, so you know, let's take a song like "Here I'm to Worship." Now, obviously, the verse is all unison. The verse is all unison because you only hear everybody singing the same thing. You don't hear different parts going on, so you know it's unison. So you have light of the world, you step down into darkness. Open my eyes, let me see. Alright, same thing. Beauty that made this heart adore you. Hope of a life spent with you. Not trying to get the rhythm there necessarily, but that's just the notes of the melody that's how we sing it. So that's the verse. Everybody's singing the same part on that. Now, obviously, the sopranos are up here. You know, I'm not going to hit the falsetto note, but light of the world. They're singing that in their soprano range. Tenors, however, are actually really singing this note. Light of the world, you step down into darkness. So we're singing the same note, like the name of the note's the same. But the difference is they're an octave apart because tenors have a lower register. Men sing lower than women, in other words. Or if you have, you know, female sopranos or female tenors, the tenors are singing lower than the sopranos. They sing the tenor because they have a lower voice when they sing. So, that's kind of what parts is all about. Is just finding those three parts and figuring out what the notes are. Now, you know, when you get to the chorus, things are obviously going to change. So, now what's kind of cool is the soprano is going to keep singing the melody line. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. Okay, so they're singing that melody line. The melody line is the easiest part to pick out. Most kids can pick out the melody line. Just sit there, you know, and pick out a melody line. Mary had a little lamb. You know, anybody can sit there and figure out what the melody line is. If you don't, you probably need to work on that or reevaluate your calling to the parts department, teaching parts department. So Now, picking the melody line out, if you can't hear the melody, that's one thing. If you just need practice picking it out, that's another thing. Pretty much, if you can listen and hear a song on the radio, and within the first couple of notes, you know what song it is, you can play by ear, you can pick out a part. So most people can do that. Very few people that just don't have the ear for it to do that. Okay, what I like to do is I'll pick out the lead part, which, like we said, we're making that the soprano for this song. After that, I like to go through and pick out the tenor part. Tenor part's usually pretty easy to sing or hear too, because usually it's the guys. You just distinguish, okay, this is what the guys are singing. I want to hit that note and figure out what it is. Now, you have a knowledge of chords, hopefully here, or if not, you need to go take a couple of lessons from one of our beginner courses where you get just a basic understanding of chords for parts. You're going to need it, unless you just want to read music the whole time. But most people don't do that or can't do that. So you're going to have the tenor part, which is going to be 2 parts below the soprano. Okay, now I told you I was going to tell you a trick that you can use using passing chords to figure out parts. The majority of songs, the way that they work is that you have, like say we're in the key of F, you have F major chord, which is your root, which is your 1, which is your root chord for that song. The song's going to pretty much start and end on that song, because that's what key it's in, is the key of F. Here in the worship is in the key of F. So your passing chord for F is going to be usually a G minor, for part's sake, okay? Now, of course, there's different inversions that come into play depending on the song. And we're just going to use F as an example here, but you have F, G minor. Okay, so F is F, A, C, G minor is G, B flat, D. Now we're going to go up to the next inversion of F, A, C, F. Next inversion of G minor, B flat, D, G. Next inversion of F, C, F, A. Next inversion of G minor, D, G, B flat. Now you're back to the first inversion that we started with, okay? So, okay, that's for F. So generally speaking, the passing chord is the whole step above the root note, that minor chord. So it's basically your major 1 and your minor 2 are passing chords of each other. Okay, so that's F for you. We're just going to go over F because that's what key we're in. Obviously, we probably are going to want to take a minute and go over every single key, every single passing chord that there is for this. So when we're playing this song, we know that the melody note for sopranos is "Here I am to worship." Now we know the key of F here, so you're figuring out your parts. Like I said, you can figure out the tenor part. You can figure all this out by ear, but we also want to use a little bit of knowledge here to make sure that, hey, these vocals are going to match the chords that are being played. Okay, so if we said, okay, B flat, if we want to connect the rest of the chord that usually probably will go with it, that's a G minor inversion with the D at the bottom, D, G, B flat. So your parts are going to be G for alto, D for soprano. Now, when you're writing your parts out, it's very important that you write your parts out as a beginner learning to figure out the vocals. Very important. Get all the lyrics on a page. Put S-A-T, soprano, alto, tenor, over the words or next to the words, and then write out over each syllable, over each word, what note is being played. So, for example, if you are playing the verse 1 of Here I'm the Worship, you're going to write over the word light an A, because that's the melody note there. Light, that's what everybody's singing. Light of, over the word of, you're going to write an A as well, because it's the same melody note. The, over the you're going to write a B flat. World, you're going to write a G. Okay, you get kind of where I'm coming from. So you're writing all of this as you're trying to figure it out, and you want to kind of start trying to make some sense out of it, because your vocals need to match your chords that are being played on the piano. So that's where you're going to have a basic, if not an advanced knowledge, which is helpful, of chords. So you have the Here I am to worship. Okay, now we're going to go through the soprano and tenor parts because those are usually the easiest. But kind of what I was getting to is when you're writing the parts out, you should be seeing a lot of these same notes, these same groupings together. You should see a lot of FACs being written over together, or maybe it'll be ACF or CFA. You should see a lot of G, B flat, D. Those 3 notes written together over the same syllable. If your song is in the key of F, obviously if your song is in a different key, you're going to start seeing different things. We'll go over that in a minute. So We figured out the soprano part a second ago. Here I am to worship. Now tenor is easy too. Here I am to worship. You know, pretty obvious. Tenor is usually pretty easy to hear if you're listening to the CD or track. Here I am to worship. Here I am to bow down. Here I am to say that you're my God. So you're going to have the tenor part right there. It's going to be pretty easy to figure out. But your alto part is going to be, you're going to find it's going to be in between. So, and I'm just using this song as an example. But you're going to have, say, you know, that first note. Here, we figured out soprano is a B flat. Here, tenor is a D. The note that naturally goes in between those two to make a G minor, obviously you can see we're playing part of a G minor chord here because, you know, that's the passing chord for F. We're in the key of F. G is going to be the natural note that the alto should be singing. So let's say, you know, you have a hard time hearing the alto part, which a lot of you are going to have probably because alto is the toughest part to hear. For me, a lot of times, even when I'm listening with headphones on, I cannot hear the altos singing. And it's hard to hear them sometimes. They get lost in the middle of the sopranos and tenors because their part is more of a blending part. In fact, alto by itself tends to sound bad. I hate to say that, but as a part by itself, it sounds bad. If you sing the alto part, you sound like you're singing flat. But when it's blended in between the soprano and tenor, it sounds fantastic. It sounds in harmony. So that's why it's hard to hear for a lot of people. But here, okay, so we know that here is D for the tenor, B flat for the soprano, so we can naturally just know, even if we can't hear it, it needs to be a G for alto, okay? So, here I, okay? So we know that C is I for tenors, A is I for sopranos. That looks like an F chord, an F major chord, right? One of the inversions that you've practiced. And I'm going to show you, we're going to go over all of those, we're going to learn them here shortly. But so you know that the middle note for alto is most likely going to be an F. So, here I am, okay? Here I am to. Okay, so we found that tenor was singing B flat, soprano was singing G. That looks like a G minor chord, so we're only missing one of the notes here. You kind of get where I'm coming from. So D is going to be that missing alto part right there that you couldn't hear. Here I am to, and then worship. You're going back to that F, that F chord. You can hear it because the soprano is singing an A, tenor is singing a C. Obviously, that's not a G minor chord because G minor is going to have a G, B flat, and D somewhere in there. So this is obviously an F major chord. So your middle note's going to be an F. Okay, so here I am to worship. Here I am to bow down. Now you heard that the soprano part didn't say the same, or the alto part didn't say the same there. Your chords have changed. Okay, so when we're singing that, here I am to worship, piano's playing an F. Here I am to bow. Okay, the soprano or the piano just went to a C over E in Here I'm to Worship. That means that the rules have changed here now. Your vocals have to match that C major chord in some form or fashion, or else it's going to sound weird. Obviously, your vocals cannot be singing an F note here. None of them can. So if you find on the word bow that you're writing an F over one of the vocals, there's something wrong because there's no F found in a C major chord. If you find that you're playing maybe a B or an A flat or a D flat or some crazy note like that over one of the vocals, and it does not matching the chord that's being played, then you really need to go back and listen again or try to figure out how to make it match that chord. So here I am to worship. This is the soprano. Here I am to bow down. Now, obviously, the G is make it part of the C chord. Okay, so let's do the tenor now. Here I am to worship. Here I am to bow down. Okay, notice we stayed straight on the C, and this is where I say it's subjective because you can kind of make it what you want. Some people might do, here I am to worship, here I am to bow down. Some people might want to go down to the B flat right there. That's not necessarily wrong. To me, it doesn't sound as good as staying straight for the tenors, but you know, you're not necessarily hitting a wrong note. So, so you figured out the tenor's hitting a C there, the soprano's hitting a G, your chord is a C over E, so the alto part's going to be that E note right there, okay? It should, in other words, your vocals are starting to match the chord sheet. The vocals are matching the chord sheet. So, alto would be, here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, and then here I am to say. Now we're going back to an F over A. Okay, so now the vocals say that you're my God. So the vocals are going to change a little bit. All right, so that's kind of the premise. I'm not teaching you the parts to hear him to worship just as a song, but I'm trying to just get you a concept here that your vocals are just a reflection of the chords. And if you can figure out the chords and get an understanding of how they work, then you can teach vocals. Now, that's not to say that you have to understand chords to be able to teach vocals. There's many different ways to do it. You may be able to just write, you might just be able to read the music. Like you say, if you had the bar and the staff and like classical music and everything, sometimes vocals come written like that, and you can just read it and teach it. That's another way to do it. I've seen people do it that way. Obviously, they don't have the ability to just listen to a song and teach somebody that song most times because they don't have the ear for it. That's why they're having to use the sheet. In my opinion, it's great. It's better to be able to just listen to the song and figure it out because then you can sing any song you want. And it just takes a little bit of practice. And I understand everybody doesn't have time to do that, but if you're just going to read it, it probably would be better for you just to read it and not be taking this course maybe, because we're teaching you how to understand vocal parts so you can teach others and have an understanding of how vocal parts work, as opposed to just reading it off of a sheet. Totally different concept. So that's one example there. There's a lot of different ways we could tackle this, but that's one example there. Now let's go over the passing chords really quickly. Obviously, you need to have a basic fundamental understanding of your major and minor chords, which, like I said, I'm going to assume that you already have. If not, you really need to go take the first couple free lessons of our beginner classes to get a basic understanding, and then you need to learn all your major and minor chords. Alright, so we went over F. The passing chord for F is G minor. Okay, now we're going to go to G flat. Okay, G flat, I'm not going to say every note. This is something where you need to take the first couple beginner classes. Okay, A flat, G minor, A flat minor is your passing chord. So G flat, A flat minor, G flat, A flat minor, G flat, A flat minor, G flat. Those are your passing chords for G flat. G, A minor, G, A minor, G, A minor, G. Okay, A flat, B flat minor, A flat, B flat minor, A flat, B flat minor, A flat. A, B minor, A, B minor, A, B minor, A. B flat, C minor, B flat, C minor, B flat, C minor, B flat. B, D flat minor, B, D flat minor, B, D flat minor, B. C, D minor, C, D minor, C, D minor, C. D flat, E flat minor, D flat, E flat minor, D flat, E flat minor, D flat. D, E minor, D, E minor, D, E minor, D. E flat, F minor, E flat, F minor, E flat, F minor, E flat. E, F sharp minor, E, F sharp minor, E, F sharp minor, E, then we're back to F. Alright, so that's basically how parts work. Now, that is not to say that is the only way that they can work, but probably 90% of the time that's how they work. Sometimes you've got to adjust the parts where they may have to match a diminished chord or an augmented chord or something like that. Pretty rare that occurs, but it does happen. There are different types of parts, and that's why I really say it's important to figure it out by ear. Get some headphones and listen to the CD and literally just hunt and peck for that part. And what you get may not be exactly right, but as long as it sounds good, that is what matters. So what you get may be, it may not be exactly like they sing on the CD. Sometimes I don't like the way they do it on the CD, and I want to change it. I want to do it my way. So, what you can do in that case is just make sure that the parts are matching your chord. That's just the most important thing. Make sure the parts are matching the chord, and everything else is going to be fine. Another good one is I Give Myself Away. I give myself away. We sing it in F at our church. I know it's written in B flat, I believe, originally. That's another good example, though. I give myself away. I give myself away so you can use me. I give myself away. Okay, that's obviously the melody line. That would be soprano if you had soprano singing the lead, which a lot of you probably will. But then the tenor part would be. Give myself away. I give myself away. And then it goes to melody. So you can use me, or unison, I should say. I give myself away. I give myself away so you can use me. Okay, so obviously the "so you can use me" is a unison right there. Alto would be in between there, right? So you've got these two notes right here, kind of the same idea as here in the worship. I give myself away. So then you're missing the G right here, obviously between the D and the B flat. You're missing the F, obviously between here and the C and the A. So I give myself away. I give myself away so you can use me. Okay, so we're going to be learning a lot of songs in this course. I just kind of want to get you some concepts first, and then we're actually going to teach you some songs in real time, where we're actually learning the parts. We're figuring out the parts, and I'm showing you how to hear it and how to figure it out. Okay, so hopefully you grasp just several of the concepts here, which are basically matching the chords with the vocals, making sure they match, making sure they sound good together. I really recommend learning the song on the piano, even if you're just a choir leader, you're not a pianist. I recommend at least playing just the basic chords for the song. That way you understand what the chord structure is, and that way you can, when you go to figure out the parts, you can realize, hey, am I staying inside? Am I matching the vocals, the vocal notes with the chord? Because, like I said, you're basically, a chord is made up of three parts. A choir is made up of three different parts: sopranos, altos, tenors. So they kind of just reflect the chords. If you're playing a song in its most basic form, just with melody. And obviously we're not playing with a whole lot of twos and suspended twos and minor sevenths and stuff. Parts tend to just sing the basic part, the basic chord. But there are cases where they do sing different things, and once again, you're going to start hearing that. The more you pick out parts, the easier it's going to get. I remember when I had picked up parts for my choir director at our old church, and I had picked them out and written them out for him many times, songs he wanted to learn, working for the church. And we got called to move and assist a church in California, and at that point they made me the music leader there, and so I became responsible for teaching all the parts. Now obviously I had never taught parts before. I had just written them down for the choir director of my former church. But what I would do is I'd listen to the song, figure the parts out, and then I would teach them the parts just off of the sheet. And the more I did that, the easier it became, to the point where it was just easier to figure it out by ear. Now, still today, there's a lot of cases where we're going to learn a new song, and I have to sit down and figure out the parts. I have to sit down and write them out and figure out and say, okay, this is what the chords are, because there's so many unconventional songs. There's so many songs out there nowadays that are just they're so different. So what we're going to do is we're going to take apart we're going to start with some basic songs. We're going to teach you how to get just basic songs down first. We'll probably do a couple of hymns like Amazing Grace or something where they're easy, and then eventually we'll gradually work into some tougher stuff, some tougher, more modern, contemporary gospel music. So anyways, God bless. Hope this course is blessing you. So for your practice this week, go through, play all your passing chords in every single key, just like we did. Slow down the video, pause it if you need to, but at all costs, go through and play these passing chords so that you can really get a good understanding of how parts flip and invert and different things, because you're going to need to understand this down the road in order to be able to understand what we're doing with the course and with the chords and with the lessons and everything. So, all right, God bless, and we'll see you back here for your next lesson.